Well, is it abnormal or just sort of par for the course? All right, here's some of the people who are up. In Oklahoma, right here, reliably red state, Senator James Lankford, who rarely ever voted out of line with former President Trump. 90% in line is apparently not conservative enough because he certified the election results. Representatives Cheney and Gonzalez, Liz Cheney out of Wyoming, she was in the news again today, are targets of far-right challengers as they voted to impeach the former president. Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, also a state this time that Joe Biden won, has faced backlash for refusing to block Georgia's electoral votes. With that, we bring in Kristen Soltis Anderson, pollster and columnist as well. Kristen, always good to see you. We appreciate you taking the time. I feel like there's a sense of deja vu of you always talk about the party in power. This would be the Democrats, perhaps, experiencing challenges from their left in this case. But how rare is it for the party out of power to have somebody, you think about Arkansas and you think about Oklahoma, traditionally states where senators wouldn't get primaried, that you've got sitting senators primaried?
Well, think about the last time you saw a lot of this happen on the Republican side. It was 2010. Republicans were out of power, and there was a lot of finger pointing and frustration within the party about why that had happened. And out of that came the Tea Party movement. And so you had a number of different instances across the country where folks who were really conservative, further to the right, challenged more establishment folks. But what's different this time around is that whether you are conservative or not actually isn't the most important factor. As you noted, many of these Republicans who are facing challenges in their primaries are quite conservative in their voting record. They're not someone that's voting with Joe Biden an awful lot of the time in Congress. That instead, the more important axis for these voters is, are you fighting? And for many of them, fighting means, did you fight for Donald Trump when it came to those election results?
It seems as though Donald Trump matters so much in the American political landscape. Never before has a former president played such a large role after he left office. Mike Allen from Axios was on with us in an exclusive interview on Monday night, talking about his reporting that Democrats in the heartland are so worried about the far left of the Democratic Party when it comes to their races. Take a listen.
You talk to Democrats and they'll tell you that they had two band-aids. One was Barack Obama, who transcended the usual Democratic message, and the other one was Donald Trump, who helped them. And I talked to Democrats today in preparation for this segment who said the only way they can keep the House is Donald Trump. They said that if he'll keep being out there with his message that elections are fixed, you shouldn't talk to pollsters, you shouldn't vote, that is the one thing that can help them.
So that may drive Democratic turnout. How important is President Trump going to be in the primary fights that we just talked about?
Well, Donald Trump has a reasonably good record of being able to endorse folks in primaries. There are instances where his endorsed candidate didn't win, but usually it meant someone even further to the right or sort of an even closer inheritor of the Trump legacy wound up winning. You had instances, Congressman Madison Cawthorn from North Carolina, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert from Colorado. Both of them won seats in Congress, even though Donald Trump had endorsed their opponent in the primary. So his record's not perfect, but his influence is very strong. And I think the concern for Republicans is that if Donald Trump is a major presence, but he's not on the ballot, he's not on the ballot in the way that you would be if you were president, do Republicans get all of the downsides of Donald Trump, meaning that activates Democrats, it turns off some of those swing voters, but they don't get any of the upsides, which is Donald Trump does turn out a lot of people who don't normally vote in elections. They're more disconnected from the political process, but they like him. So that's the trouble Republicans are in. Do they get all the downsides of Trump, but none of the upsides?
Well, they learned that lesson pretty abjectly in Georgia, didn't they?
That's right. In Georgia, you had an instance where because Donald Trump had come out and said, look, I don't think these elections are working, I think there's fraud, there's a lot of real concern on the Republican side that led to depressed voter turnout. Right. That if a large piece of the Republican coalition thinks elections just aren't worth it, they aren't working anymore, do they even bother turning out for the ballot box? So that's the double-edged sword here of this kind of rhetoric coming from Trump is, on the one hand, he thinks it's activating and motivating his supporters. On the other hand, is it actually depressing them by making them think that elections just don't count?
Excellent point. Kristen Soltis Anderson, there's a reason we have you here. Thank you very much. Great perspective. Good to see you.